First and foremost, when we look at the dollar, we're talking about ownership. We don't actually own dollars, right? We don't actually own dollars. The way I think about somebody who owns a dollar is who does it rest with at night? When all of this stuff, when the ish hits the fan, who does the dollar sleep with? And it's not sleeping with us. It's the one that's leaving us, right? And it also belongs to who actually earns a dollar when they're sleeping, right? And many of us don't earn dollars while we're sleeping. In fact, most of the Black entrepreneurs that exist are sole proprietors. So if they don't wake up and go to work, or my contractors who work on my properties, et cetera, then they're not making money, right? So we actually don't own that many dollars in our community, and that's why we don't have economic power, first and foremost. Part of this is that we know, and this goes to land and to the dollar, is that we know from our African roots that how we saw property and how we saw currency is not the same as the system that we're in. Okay, we had this beautiful place called Africa, and some people may say I'm being hypothetical. We had this beautiful place called Africa, and it was abundant, and it is abundant. It still is. This is why people are still coming and raping it, right? So we had this place, and we didn't see possession or property in the same way that those who came from outside saw it. So we didn't feel like we needed to put up a fence and have these defined lines and things of that nature. And so as a result, when other people with different belief system about property came in, they were like, this is how we see property. We see it as ownership and something for me to possess. We didn't see it as such because we knew that it was a gift from God, right? And so now we are in their paradigm. We are in their paradigm, and this is why real estate is so important. When we look at the scripture, right, after life, after God breathing life into all of us, the second greatest gift that God gives is land. Whether it's the Garden of Eden, whether it's the Promised Land, the second greatest gift is land. And so I'm not really concerned about the dollar because we know that the dollar has no inherent value. It's getting inflated every single year, and it's just paper. What I'm concerned about is what the Earn Your Leisure brothers have on is the assets, because that's where the real value is. And if we were to do a balance sheet of the Black community, I don't care about the 1.3 trillion because a lot of that money is coming from white people, right? If we were actually to do a balance sheet of the Black community, our balance sheet would be negative, meaning that we actually don't have any dollars. So that's what I'm concerned about, is helping us acquire assets that put us in, that create dollars so that we can reinvest and expand from that way. But the 1.3, we're getting it from people who don't care about us and are actually enslaving us on the corporate plantation. People think they have this good salary. A salary is equivalent to slavery. Once you're on a salary, they can, all of a sudden you're working 50 hours a week, 60 hours a week, 70 hours a week, right? And you divide that by how much you're earning and you realize, wow, I'm making the same thing that the guy at TJ Maxx makes. Right? So we got to be very careful about chasing the dollar. As Dr. Watkins said, we are been taught to shoot in the wrong direction. We're the only ones on Instagram with money phones to our head. We think that this is where the value is, yet there's no asset there. So this is why I don't believe that we actually have a Black dollar, because our balance sheet is actually negative.
You know, that's an interesting, I'm glad you posed kind of a,
Well, Julia, I can't. Money phone. These are ones, by the way. Go ahead, Jay.
That's a lot of ones.
What you doing with all those ones, Doctor?
Where you been at, Doc? Where you been at, Doc?
Too much quarantine radio.
No more questions.
You know what's so funny about that kind of opposing point is I agree that many of us, much of the money in our community is earned income, right? So it comes from us exchanging hours for dollars, and usually those hours or dollars are from businesses and corporations that we don't own many times. But we can, as Wall Street Trapper said, our brother, he said, we can leverage that and we can pimp those hours for dollars if we know how to take those hours for dollars and not be the consumer class, but be the ownership class and then investing those dollars. So if all you do is exchange your hours for dollars at work, to then go recycle that money back with the same communities, right? And you don't actually put the money to work, yes, you are caught up on a negative balance sheet of simply just leveraging your time. Your time is your only real asset because you have no other assets to produce dollars or value for you, right? So I think that's a very good point. Let's see what the kings from Earn Your Leisure got to say on this subject. How do you all see the power of the Black dollar? What does that mean to you?
Just like I told you, Jay, as far as, I'm a financial advisor, and it was really an eye-opening experience for me when I came into business. I started my career when I was 24 years old, so over like 10 years ago. And when I first came in, my office was in Manhattan on Park Avenue. And if anybody's not familiar with Manhattan, Park Avenue, that's, that's like
Park Avenue Monopoly.
Yeah, exactly. So it was interesting because I'm 24-year-old, you know, black kid. My name is Rashad Bilal. Everybody knows I'm black. There's no hiding that. And everybody in my office was Jewish. It was like 95% Jewish and a little bit of Italian. And when I actually started to become friends with a lot of these guys and just be around them, I just realized that the way that we grew up was just so vast, and it's just so crazy that you could be so close and be so apart. Because like they was having fundraisers for Jewish hospitals and Jewish schools, and they wasn't raising $10,000, $15,000. They was raising $900,000, a fundraiser, a dinner. And it really just opened my eye to the power of working together. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't even like, you know, like they didn't have to have a rally. They didn't have to have it on the Breakfast Club. Like they just sent a couple emails, and the head of this hospital, the head of this hedge fund, the head of this, and they came together.
Transformers
and they do that stuff all the time. And then I started to see Italian Americans doing the same thing and Irish Americans doing the same thing. And as a financial advisor, it really, because it's like a lot of times when we're growing up and you only see the neighborhood. So it's like me and Troy have this conversation a lot. And, you know, it was crazy that, you know, we actually teach a program, and Troy will talk about that. Yeah. But one of the kids that came into the program a few summers ago, he was like 14 years old at the time. And it was him and another young man. They were both like 14, 15. So we asked him, like, what do you want to be when you grow up? So one kid said an engineer. And the other kid kind of like started laughing. And we was like, well, why you laugh? What do you want to be? He was like, I don't know, something realistic, like probably like sanitation. And when he said that, it really spoke to me, because it's like, those kind of jobs are like hitting the lottery. Like we think like if you get a sanitation, and it's not like I said, I have none against any union job, but that's like what we aspire to be. And we don't even think about owning a business or having multiple real estate portfolio or owning stock or anything like that. And it's like, we don't even know what we don't know until we're exposed to that. So that's what we really try to do, is just exposure, because it's like, I feel like once you actually start to see like the promised land, quote unquote, and that there's more to life than just sports and entertainment and just working a regular job. And you actually can see, oh, I can actually be a business owner. Yeah. I can actually, you know, do this. And it's like a lot of times without that proper exposure, the limitation is set to what you're around. And what you're around is pretty much 9 to 5, get a good job. Like you hear that a lot. It's like you get a good job. Right? It's like, that's like a lot of people's parents teach them, go to school and get a good job. But what is a good job? Because there is no such thing as job security. Right. So really, you just putting yourself in a situation where you're in somebody else's hands.
And it goes back to that conversation of nurturing, right? Like the same kid who wants to be an engineer, we're going to look at it like, yo, good luck. You're on your own, kid. Like, go figure it out, right? There's no mentorship piece. But if that same kid was the best basketball player in the neighborhood, we're going to surround that kid to make sure that he makes it out. And we don't see that. We don't see that in our community with kids who want to be engineers, who want to be doctors, who want to be lawyers. It's like, all right, go figure it out with no mentorship piece. So that's what we're trying to do here. Is like, look, you want to be that? Great. Let's go find somebody for you in our community that can guide you, right? Because the best thing that they're going to do is teach you the mistakes that they made, so now that you don't make them, right? So now you're ahead of the game, and now you have the mentorship piece. First thing you got to do is now the same thing that was given to you. Now go reach back. And I think that's super important. Like what we're doing here now, right? We have the piece that gauges those two things together. We have the mentorship piece, and now kids who are in the neighborhood can say like, look, I can start my own media company. These guys just did it, right? I don't have to be that rapper or that athlete. Yo, these guys are just as popping on social media as them. You know what I'm saying? So like, we're changing the narrative, and this doing like webinars like this is what changes the narrative long-term.
Now, I'm glad you said that. Just one more thing, and shout out to Derek Falcon. That's one of our favorite guests that we had on episode 11 of our podcast. And he said so many great things. He's a restaurant owner in Baltimore. And what he said that really stuck with me, what Troy just said, is like, in our communities, whether it's New York, Chicago, Atlanta, Baltimore, DC, if you see a kid that's 14 years old and he's 6'7", you clamoring around him like, yo, keep him out of trouble. Make sure he get home. Because he might be the next LeBron, right?
Somebody gonna do his homework for him.
Yeah,
all that.
It's like, yo, you clamoring like he gets grade A treatment, or if he could put words together, you bringing him to shows, he might be the next Meek Mill. But it's like the young entrepreneur, that got a barbershop, like you throw him to the wolves and it's like, oh, my crackhead uncle, he just got out of jail. Can he sweep the steps up for you? Like, stop doing that. Like, a lot of times we send the worst in our community at our best potential, because the entrepreneurs, the creatives, those are the future. As far as, and that's going to last a lot longer than somebody playing sports, because your sports career might be 3 or 4 years at most, if you're lucky, but it's like an entrepreneur that could last forever in perpetuity. And so it's like a lot of times the mindset of that is extremely important. And it's like, we see that all the time where we take care of an athlete, but a young entrepreneur that's trying to sell water on the street, we look at him like, he, you know what I'm saying? Like, yo, get out of here. Like you a peasant.
We push them toward careers where there's a 1% like chance of them being successful, where we could be pushing them into careers like computer science, where 99% of the kids, if they study it, are gonna have a success rate, right? So it's like the mindset, I think what Dr. Boyd said is totally correct, right? We gotta redirect the gun, right? Not at ourselves, we gotta redirect it in the right direction, right? Let's focus on something that is sustainable.
One piece that I really feel like is that expectations and values of what we think is the cool thing in our community. King Julian, expound on that point right there, please.
Yeah. So right now, what I know from a spiritual standpoint, and this goes with what Rashad said, is we define ourselves. We define ourselves based on what we see. Okay. We define ourselves based on what we see. But just because you were born into poverty doesn't mean that you're poor. All right. Malcolm said it in the most powerful way when he was talking about our culture. He basically said, just because a cat has babies in the oven doesn't mean that they're biscuits, right? If a cat has baby in the oven, it doesn't mean that they're biscuits. And we believe that because we are born into poverty, which is a condition, poverty is a condition. What we need to get out of is the poverty consciousness, because the poverty consciousness is what ultimately recreates the condition. So when we define ourselves based on what we are born into, then we accept that as our identity, and then we start operating and being, doing, and having from that place. And we've seen people get out of that mindset and recognize that I come from the Creator. I'm actually a child of God. These are conditions, and I'm going to pose this to the community. The way I think about our situation here on Earth and as people of African descent, I believe that this is a video game, and we just chose the hardest level. The other levels were too easy for us. And so we said, you know what? I want to be Black. I want to give me no assets, give me a single mom, give me a terrible education system, and I'm going to go see if I can go win this game. I believe that that's the spiritual choice that we made. And even if it's not, what happens is if we start to see life in that way, that this is an obstacle course that we created in the spiritual realm before we got here, and we only created these obstacles as high, mountains as high as they are, and these pits as deep as they are, for our own growth and development, then it allows us to face what is ahead of us with more confidence and courage, because we know that we created them. What we've been doing is we've been believing that other people are creating these things. And yes, there are some people who are perpetrating. There are other people who are putting obstacles intentionally in our way. But if we just see it as, if we see it as an opportunity for our own growth and development, and that we just chose the hardest level. We chose the hardest level. There's people who chose to have limbs that didn't work. Right? And I chose a hard level. There's people who chose to be blind. That's a very hard level to navigate. And I just believe that that mindset, even if it's not true, I don't know if it's true, but even if it's not true, being able to approach life knowing that I may have created these obstacles for my own growth and development as a spiritual being, a temporary, eternal spiritual being, having a temporary physical experience here on this earth, I think that'll help us get out of the poverty consciousness and move towards a wealth consciousness. Because the reality is Jay, well, actually all of you, you know, mostly, I don't know everybody's balance sheet, but I think a lot of people here are millionaires. If you are a millionaire, is your daughter a millionaire?
Yeah.
Right? So if we come from a God that is infinite supply and has access to everything, then what does that make us? That makes us millionaires now, even if we can't see it as our physical reality, because we are in what I call the Father's will, right? Because we are written in the will. And so that's how I move with that identity. We've been trying to change folks with information alone, and information alone doesn't change people. What has to change is the identity. And once the identity, which is in the mind, changes, then our being changes, then our doing changes, and our having changes. But if you just put information at people, which is what we've been doing kind of with financial literacy, is just giving people more information, but they still have a poverty consciousness, then they can't even receive the information in the soil of their mind.